Hi, and welcome to the BFP. Courtney is a nurse who started her TTC journey at the start of the COVID pandemic. She had a hard time conceiving naturally, so she went on to try an IUI, followed by IVF, which gave her two daughters. She's now helping others through their IVF journey with her self developed course, the InVitro Nurse's Guide to Navigating IVF, and is launching on August 20th. Hi, Courtney. Welcome to Before the
Hi.
BFP.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're so glad to have you on. Would you mind going on and introducing yourself?
Of course. So my name's Courtney. I've been a registered nurse for 10 years now. I am from Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm a native here. I've lived here all my life. And married to my awesome husband, Michael. We got married back in 2018, and we have two daughters, a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old, thanks to the IVF process.
That's awesome. What are you spending your days doing right now? What are you up to?
I am just wrapping up the finishing touches on the course that you mentioned. It's been in development since February of this year. So it's really become such a passion project of mine, to teach people more about the IVF process. Even as a nurse going through it, I was very overwhelmed. So I can only imagine how people who don't have a medical background feel when they're going through it. So that's finally coming to a head here, and we're going to be launching August 20th, as you mentioned. But outside of that, I just spend time with my family. I now work part time as a nurse. I just work 2 days a week, which is great. So I'm home most of the time with my two girls. Yeah, so it's just family and working and getting this passion project up and running.
Gotta love passion products. That's what
Yeah,
we're working on right now here too.
absolutely.
So when did you decide to start trying for a baby? Let's jump at the beginning.
So, my husband and I, like I said, got married in 2018, bought our first home in 2019. At the end of 2019, my husband's also a nurse. So, 2019, I think we bought in September. Then we were talking seriously about starting a family at the end of that year, which is when COVID hit. So, not the best timing. My husband and I were both nurses working the bedside during that time. But, you hear about something like this, you don't think it's going to, at the time, we didn't think it was going to become something as big as what it really turned into. So, tried on our own for about 6 months. And because I was 30 at that time, I didn't want to give it the whole typical year that they typically recommend. I had also been on like oral birth control for about 15 years prior. So I gave my body a few months to be off of it before we really started trying that December.
Mhm.
And started tracking my ovulation every month. I'm a very regular cycle girl. I have no known issues. My so anyway, getting ahead of myself. So, tried on our own for about 6 months, tracking ovulation. Everything was looking great. But it just wasn't happening on its own. So in May of 2019, I reached out to a fertility specialist and sat down, we did a consult, took our, general medical history, did some basic testing, couldn't find anything wrong. So she's like, "We think you'd be a great candidate for an IUI," which is the intrauterine insemination. Relatively simple, straightforward. So we went on to IUI. We actually did 3 rounds of IUI, the intrauterine insemination, very straightforward, easy procedure compared to IVF.
Yeah.
And none of that was working. So after the 3 failed rounds of IUI, we received our official diagnosis of unexplained infertility. And that's when my doctor said, "I think you would be now a good candidate for IVF." And being a nurse, a very type A person, I jumped straight into researching and success rates of the clinic that I was at versus like the national average. And I found that the clinic that I was actually at, which had the best Google and Yelp reviews, that's how I initially found this clinic, was not on par with the national average. So, did my homework, found a clinic near me that had better than the national average success rates. And so I ended up switching to them before I decided to really get into the IVF process. But still, that physician told me, "I still think you should move on with IVF." And yeah, that's when we started. So we sat down, had our initial consult that year. I can't remember exactly what month, but it was in 2019. Quickly moved into the egg retrieval process. Then you go on to whether or not you want to test your embryos genetically. So we ended up doing that. And we got really good results from just our first round of egg retrieval. So luckily, I only had to do the retrieval once.
That's
We ended
awesome.
up with, yeah, it was great. We ended up with 5 girls and 1 boy. And so they tend to want to transfer your best graded embryo first, which happened to be our boy. But because we only had 1 boy, I was sort of nervous. So I did an additional test called an ERA. It's endometrial receptivity assay. So basically, long story short, looks at they take a biopsy of your endometrial lining to
Hmm.
see if it's the best timing to implant the embryo. So I did that, and my test actually came back inconclusive, which my doctor's like, I have never seen that test result. It's either you're good to go or you need more progesterone. So, to err on the side of caution, we ended up transferring one of our girls first, just for peace of mind. And that went off without a hitch. I got pregnant, had a great and easy pregnancy, had her full term, easy delivery, healthy baby. It was a breeze. I mean, it was best case. You hear a lot of horror stories when people are going through IVF, having to go through multiple retrievals, multiple transfers before they actually end up getting a live birth. And I was very fortunate that I only had to go through up to that point 1 egg retrieval and 1 transfer to get a baby. So that was great. Then when she turned 1, we decided to gear up for another transfer. We were
Hmm.
planning on transferring our boy, which we ended up doing. He also stuck, got pregnant right away. All of our testing, our ultrasounds, I should say, were looking good. Graduated from my IVF clinic at 9 weeks and then had my first OB appointment at
Yeah.
10 weeks. So at that 9-week graduation appointment, they did one last ultrasound. I was able to see heartbeat. I had already seen heartbeat like 2 times prior to that. Everything was looking good. And when I went in for my first OB appointment, there was no heartbeat. So that really caught me off guard because I hadn't had any cramping, I hadn't had any bleeding, not to suggest that there was a problem. So I was obviously heartbroken that we had lost our one and only boy, just completely sideswiped. It's just something you don't anticipate with the first go around having gone
Yeah.
so easy and smooth. I really took that for granted and thought that my second go around would be just as easy. So that was obviously nothing that I had planned for. Nothing can prepare you for going through something like that. I ended up having a D&C and just took some time. That was July, and I had to just taken some time to kind of prepare myself to go into the next transfer. But I wanted to give myself really time physically and emotionally to really heal.
Right.
So with that baby, I would have been due February 10th. And I ended up transferring embryo number 3 February 14th.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was a crazy week for me because here I am, kind of mourning my would be due date with the baby that I lost, but also happy and hopeful for the baby to come. So we transferred our third embryo, another girl, on February 14th. And again, that went off without a hitch. I was very nervous to stop the medications that you stop anywhere from like 10 to 12 weeks, just because I was like, this is when I lost the last baby. Like, was that part of it? Is this going to happen again? Your anxiety is just so high with everything I had already gone through with infertility and IVF and all of the emotions and the money and the physical, pieces that come with that. Like, I think it just heightens your sense of anxiety. So going into that third transfer, I was definitely kind of holding my breath and just kind of waiting for the bad news to come. And somehow I got through it. And she is here now, happy and healthy, 9 months old. So I had her at 35 when I turned 35. So I was technically considered geriatric and high risk with being IVF and after the loss. And honestly, after going through a pregnancy in Arizona, 6, 7, 8, 9 months pregnant through the summer, I was like, we are done. So, I am so grateful for what IVF was able to bring to me. And my chapter personally with treatment is closed. But I really I wanted to figure out a way, how can I take my experience not only as an IVF patient, but a nurse. I have my master's in education. I'm really passionate about educating. How can I take all of these components of myself and help others, going through this journey? So this course is something that came to mind 3 months postpartum. I think I must have been having postpartum psychosis deciding to launch this course with a 2.5-year-old and a newborn. But here we are, and I'm really excited. And I hope other people find it helpful and feel like they have kind of a hand to hold through their own journey.
Yeah, I think a lot of what mothers do postpartum has to be a passion.
Yeah,
Because if you're not
absolutely.
passionate about it, there's just no time in the day to make for
It
it.
can be yeah, everything, even like your career can feel like a chore if it's not something you're passionate about. So
Yeah.
it is important to have that passion for sure.
Yeah, I definitely stopped working after my son was born. Just didn't like my job anymore.
Yeah,
So,
I
uh,
totally feel that. I went down to part-time myself, and it happened to be just a good balance of, like, I think if I was home 7 days a week, I would go crazy. So getting out just those 2 days a week and having, interaction with the real world really helps keep things in check for me. I
so,
totally get that.
yeah, I worked remotely from home. So I would still be home with the kid crawling
Yeah.
all over me. Yeah. Okay. So I had a couple quick questions for you. What are
Yeah,
some
of
things
course.
that helped support you emotionally or practically while you were in the middle of this journey?
So, my husband, for sure, him and I are both only children. So, having more than one child ourselves, just having a family in general, was something that we, before we even got married, had talked a lot about. So, he's always been my number one supporter. That really helped me get through that. I think initially he was a little nervous moving on to IVF just because it's so time consuming. It's so emotionally consuming. It's so financially consuming. I think that was his biggest thing with that, is like, well, how much is this going to cost? But he's been there through it. We figured our way through it. I loved watching Call the Midwife when I was pregnant, waiting to become pregnant. Like, just, I have always had this fascination with like pregnancy. I became a nurse to actually be a labor and delivery nurse, or NICU. Like, I just love everything pregnancy and babies. So that show really spoke to me. The one thing that I feel like supported me the best, honestly, is I'm on Facebook, and I was on a few like local Facebook, BF Arizona Facebook groups. And from there, I found that there were groups like nationwide, even worldwide, of these women that join. And you can put in like IVF transfers, June 2022. And within that group, you have all of these women who are transferring that month. I was able to say, hey, I'm transferring, like with my last daughter. I joined like a February transfer group, and I said, hey, I'm transferring February 14th. Is anybody transferring around this day? And there ended up being 9 of us within that group who were all transferring on the same exact day. So from there, we went into like a private group chat. And these are people who obviously had gone through their egg retrieval, were gearing up for their transfers. We all went through the 2-week wait together, which is one of arguably the hardest times emotionally during IVF, because you're just sitting here at home, symptom spotting, and like I had just felt a little twinge. Like, what does that mean? Is that good? Is it bad? Like, you can really drive yourself crazy quickly. And so having this group of 9 other women who were at the same exact point in their journey that I was helped tremendously. So we stayed in touch throughout our whole pregnancy. It was so fun, just like hearing each of our labor and delivery stories as each of us, got to go through labor and delivery. And I have never met any of these women in person. They're all over the country. And we still, to this day, I mean, I'm 9 months postpartum now, keep in touch. We send photos. We just say, what foods are your kids liking? And just any stage that you're in, they're in that same exact stage. So I couldn't imagine, honestly, going through a transfer without having them. As really, I mean, my husband is my rock, but like he can only
understand so much.
understand, yeah, to
Yeah.
such a certain extent. So
Yeah.
having these women, even though, we're technically strangers, like they've become best friends. So I would so suggest reaching out if you're on Facebook, finding a transfer group if you're going through IVF, obviously. But there were a few infertility groups I joined too. Like when I had the loss, there was a pregnancy loss group that, I posted in a few times, just kind of venting my frustrations, and the other women in that group understood it. And it's just nice, like even though I don't know these women personally, it's nice to have somebody who genuinely understands what you're going through. So I think support groups online are huge for a millennial like me and any other millennials maybe listening.
I joined the Facebook was so when I was trying to get pregnant, TikTok wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
So I joined all the Facebook groups. And even now I'm in like an April due date group for 2021, even though my son ended up being born in May,
Yes.
and a February one for my daughter, even though she was born in March.
Yep. Same
And
for
then
my
these,
3-year-old. I'm in a May 2022 and then the October 2024. And
yeah,
it's great. I mean, you see all these babies as newborns and now they're like, months old, 3 years old, depending on what group you're in. So it's a lot of fun being able to connect with people, even if you don't know them personally. You just feel that connection. I
exactly.
think
And
that's an
so
important,
helpful too.
yeah, for
Like
sure.
they'll say like, my daughter's doing this. Is this normal?
Right.
Especially as a first time mom, that was really
Right.
helpful for me.
Yes. Yes. I absolutely agree with that.
When you went through your loss, were there things that people said that helped, or were there things that they said that you wish no one would ever say so people would know?
I, to this day, had a family member say to me, it wasn't a super close family member, and it was somebody on my husband's side, but I will never forget when we were gearing up for our next one. She was like, well, you've had that loss and you plan and God laughs. And I just could not, I was speechless. I did not know what to say in response to that. It was just such a hurtful thing. My mother-in-law actually, she has twin girls. My husband's like nieces, but
Yeah.
she has twin girls that she looks at as her own, like her own daughters. They're her granddaughters. But, she said, well, you losing the baby was a really good lesson in loss for the girls who were like
Oh,
16 at the time. And I'm like, what a weird, I didn't say it. I'm such like a polite person, even if I'm
non-confrontational.
offended by something. I don't go there with people and like speak my
Yeah.
mind that well. But I just was like, I didn't know what to say. I was flabbergasted, to be honest. I'm like,
I'm
it was
flabbergasted.
a good lesson in loss for the girls. Like, this would have been your great grandchild that you're talking about. I don't know. But I see all those TikToks, like, things people have said. And I was at one point that person who hadn't yet gone through infertility, who was having friends who were going through it, and they're, telling you their stories. And I don't know that there is a right thing to say. I know there's a lot of wrong things that you can say. The one thing that comes to mind is when I was sharing the loss with a coworker. Being a nurse, I had to tell my coworkers pretty darn early when I was pregnant because we give a lot of medications that you can't handle when you're pregnant. So I ended up having to like tell them when I was pregnant. Then I told them when I, had the loss. And one of the things that I found, honestly, the most comforting is somebody who just genuinely said to me, thank you for being brave enough to share that with me. I appreciate you sharing that with me. And it wasn't like, I'm so sorry. Like, at least, you can get pregnant, all these other, things that you hear about people saying.
Yeah.
It was just her acknowledging it and being like, thank you for sharing that with me. And that to this day, it's just something that's kind of sat with me and resonated. If I have a loved one in my life that is unfortunately going through the same thing that I had to endure, that would probably be my go-to of just, thank you for sharing that with me. And I'm, so sorry you experienced that. And I'm here if you ever want to, discuss those feelings further. But I think like trying to pry or trying to like flip the script in a different way is just not really the way. I
Sometimes
wish
trying to
people
make it
wouldn't try to
positive is, yeah,
yeah.
making
Yeah.
it
It's like
positive
one
just
of
doesn't
those
work.
yeah, it's just one of those things you don't get it until you go through it. And like, I can't
Exactly.
fault people who haven't gone through that. I know everyone's trying to be comforting and supportive, but sometimes I just think if you don't, it's just better sometimes to say nothing than to
Yeah.
say and be like fumbling over your words, you
If you have
know?
nothing nice to
So
say, don't say anything at all.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, how do you feel now after everything that you've been through? I feel that infertility never really leaves you, but how do you feel?
Definitely. I mean, going through IVF, I look back and it probably and hopefully will be the most chaotic time of my life. And it's just one of those things like I'm glad to be done with it and past it. But I've always said, I said there are years that ask questions and years that answer. And I feel like when I was going through infertility, I was definitely in those years where I wasn't understanding why I was going through what I was going through. But now being on the other side of that, I feel like it really highlighted and made me more resilient.
Mhm.
It made my marriage more resilient. I think my husband has a better respect for just everything that I've gone through to create our family. And moving forward, I just was never, I don't think I'll ever truly be done with the IVF chapter, which is again why I decided to build this course for people because it is something that I'm so passionate about and not anything that I ever could truly close and walk away from. So I feel like this is a way that I can kind of continue staying within like the IVF world and hopefully help other people.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
If there's anything that you, in the point that you are of your life right now with your two daughters and everything you've gone through, if you could go back to you, Courtney, starting IVF or in the middle of it, or in the middle of your loss, what would you say to yourself?
I don't know that there are the words. The only thing that really comes to mind is I wanted to figure out a way to kind of commemorate the loss. So I went out and got, I think it was my 33rd birthday. I went out and got my one first and only I ever tattoo that says endure. And I feel like it's just a testament, even when you feel like you are at your lowest point in your life and you don't know how you're going to dig yourself out of this hole that you've found yourself in of grief and of loss. And you could go down that avenue for a while there, I did. I gave myself more than it's about 6 months to really emotionally and physically recover from that. But I think maybe it sounds weird, but like just having that tattoo of endure just reminded me like you are stronger than you think. You are more resilient than you think. I think I'm a much stronger person emotionally,
Mm.
physically. It's just, I mean, I feel like a badass that I
You are a
went through
badass.
this and I lived to tell about it because there were moments there where you're really just stuck and you feel like you don't know how you're going to keep going.
Mm.
Um, and did.
You
I
did.
could have said, you know what? This loss has scared me enough to not want to try again.
Mhm.
But then I thought, well, I went through all of this work to get these embryos. Like, I feel like I wouldn't be doing it justice to just discard them and be done with it. Like, I want to give another baby a chance at life. And yeah, it's not going to be the baby that I lost, but, and I got her here.
You did.
So I'm glad that, I think you do. You don't want to just make split second decisions. Like you really do need to take that time and pick up the pieces and figure out what your next move is. And that's what I did. And I just could not let the feeling in the back of my mind go that I was done having kids because I was too afraid to lose another baby. And so I did. Like my tattoo reminds me, I mean, it sounds so cheesy, but I
No, it's
did like
not.
endure through that hardship and through the fear and through the struggle. And I got her here. And I hope, my girls take that as a lesson learned that like you can do hard things, you can face, hardships and keep going and still succeed. So I feel like that's such a powerful lesson that you don't necessarily learn until you go through something really difficult like this. So, it was a hard journey to walk, but it also taught me so many lessons and lessons that I hope my girls look at and take to heart one day. It made my marriage stronger than ever. I think that's one thing I've said to so many people, like IVF will either make you or break you as a couple. I've
Right.
heard of people who unfortunately their marriage falls apart because it is an extremely stressful situation to be in. Um, and or it makes you stronger. And I'm just so thankful that I'm on the side that we came out stronger.
It's kind of, I think it's, have you heard the statistic that 50% of parents whose child passes away, they divorce?
I believe that. I cannot imagine a more stressful and emotionally trying situation to be in, and I feel for anybody who has to go through that. I
You
wouldn't
experienced
wish
that
that on
too.
my worst enemy. Yeah. Yeah.
Your loss was still a loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you guys definitely came out stronger. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through what a day in the life IVF looks like?
So, it depends on what stage you're at. I would say it's really you can group it into like the egg retrieval process and then the
Mhm.
at least for me, this was
Mm.
my journey with it. The egg retrieval process, the embryo transfer process, and then the post transfer are like
Okay.
the three biggest categories. With the egg retrieval and really with the transfer too, it's a lot of injections, it's a lot of monitoring, lab appointments, ultrasound appointments. It was really hard going through that while working as a bedside nurse because there was not a lot of wiggle room, with my work schedule, and there's also basically no wiggle room once you have started the medications with IVF, regardless of what, um, like, stage you're in. There are a ton of monitoring appointments. It's like, we have to see you on cycle day 9, cycle day 11, like, there is no wiggle room, so I struggled with that with, my work schedule and trying to make all of my appointments, but somehow I made it happen, so just a lot of monitoring appointments, a lot of getting stuck with needles either for lap draws or doing your injections. You're following this calendar that has like 1,000 things on it every day. But luckily I was a type A and I'm a nurse. So I'm used to like following orders and, not missing anything. But if you're not that person, if you're not a type A inclined personality, hopefully your partner is and they can help you stay on top of it because it really is a joint effort. Somebody's drawing up the meds, somebody's injecting it, or somebody's, going to the appointment and hopefully you've got your cheerleader in the back texting you, either there with you, holding your hand, texting you good luck. I mean, it really takes two. I don't know how, single parents who choose to go through IVF do it because you need a village, that's for sure. So
That's for sure.
just a lot of monitoring, a lot of meds, no matter what stage you're in. And then even after the embryo transfer process, you're kind of just in this like emotional bubble, just waiting for it to take your pregnancy test, your symptom spotting left and right.
System spotting's the worst.
It
I,
is because
yeah,
it's like all the side effects of the medications you on mimic the side effects of pregnancy. So you're
yeah,
like, am I
it's the worst.
pregnant? Is it the meds? Like yeah, it's a lot to go through in a short amount of time. So I try to drive home the point that I don't know if you can really do anything to prepare yourself emotionally, but you can definitely have your support system in place, support groups if you're into that kind of thing. I think you cannot have too much support going through um, this type of treatment.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So, coming back around to your course, how do you think it'll help people that are going through IVF?
So, I mean, I couldn't believe that this hadn't been done before. And that's what really kind of triggered me like, hey, why don't I do this myself? Like, I'm a patient, I'm a nurse, I'm an educator. I feel like that's the trifecta of things that it would take to really make this into a successful thing. So, being a nurse myself, going through it, I at the time was like a cardiac and a neuro nurse. So just because you're a nurse doesn't mean you know everything about healthcare. This was, going through IVF is such a niche. And
Yes.
so I was somewhat prepared in how to give the injections and drawing up medications, but I still felt extremely overwhelmed. And even my husband, who's also a nurse, but he's a pediatric nurse, so he doesn't do any of this on a daily basis. But I'm just hoping that it will help people, especially if you don't have a healthcare background, which I would say probably not the average person does. It really just takes all of the information that the average person can find super overwhelming, and it simplifies it into and easy to understand language. I have a lot of videos showing step by step how to drop the medication, how to administer. It's got like frequently asked questions, the same questions that I see over and over in a lot of the IVF Facebook groups that I'm on. Started like kind of writing down all of the questions I was seeing over and over. And I actually have my own fertility Dr. Larson. I just love him. He's one of my absolute favorite people. He was willing to sit down with me and do sort of like a Q&A. So I would give him these like 20 most frequently asked questions, and he would really do a deep dive into answering them. So I have all of those in the course, all of the burning questions that people, can't seem to not stop asking. So hopefully, if you are interested in this course, it'll answer a lot of the questions that you kind of have burning that you're waiting to ask maybe your own doctor, or maybe you haven't started IVF. Maybe you don't even know that you necessarily will need IVF. Maybe you're still going through IUI but it's not working. And so as far as I know, IVF is the next step in the process. I'm hoping it'll help people not feel so overwhelmed, feeling like they can trust in me, that I'm a nurse, I'm somebody who's gone through it, I'm somebody who's been successful at it twice. And yeah, I just want to be a helpful resource because there's so much information out there. But as we kind of are coming to learn with social media, it's hard to know what you can trust, what's credible, what's misinformation, So all of this is evidence based. I've got my doctor's input, I've got my experience, what I went through with each step. So I try to make it really relatable and not overwhelming.
It sounds amazing. I actually want to see it myself.
I think people are going to love it. I'm excited to launch, like I said, August 20th. I'm really excited to see what people's reaction is and if people are finding it helpful.
Yeah.
So, for any listeners, if you're interested in purchasing the course that goes live August 20th, you can use the promo code before the BFP for 10% off.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. So, any of our listeners, if you want to check it out, I'll have it linked in our show notes page. And remember, it's going live August 20th. So, it should be live now, and you can go ahead and check it out. And Courtney, thank you so much for jumping on with us. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your story, sharing your experience and your resources.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here and I had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.